Today on the Unveiled podcast, I have a major geek out conversation with Dr. Jimmy Leonetti. Over his career, Dr. James Leonetti has experienced many approaches to healthcare, from an investigator with US Food and Drug Administration, research assistant, medical technologist, occupational hygienist, acupuncturist, and as a practicing chiropractic physician for 15 plus years. He has seen that there is an epidemic of functional disconnection within the brain and its connection to the body, affecting maturity and accelerating health declines. His mission is to help improve this connection and strengthen the physical, mental, and emotional health to restore flourishing wellness. This was such a great conversation. I learned so much, and there's such richness in this conversation as you hear my brain catch up to what Dr. Leonetti was saying and how he was walking me through the underneath of the underneath of the underneath. And there's always more, there's always deeper. And some of this neuroformation, this forming of your neurological pathways is so pre-conscious that we really are working in a different territory when we begin to look at all of this stuff. So without further ado, I will let you get on with listening to the conversation between myself and Dr. Leonetti. Please check out the show notes for any and all resources mentioned in today's episode. I am delighted to welcome Dr. Jimmy Leonetti to the podcast today. Welcome. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Oh, this is, I've been looking forward to this because I'm going to pick your brain and I'm looking forward to this great conversation we're going to have.
Well, long-term listeners, and if they've listened to the intro, will understand why I am so excited to interview you. And new listeners will understand during the course of our conversation that you and I have a lot of touch points and a lot of connection points in common, where we are probably going to geek out and go deep and, involved in this recording, which is great. That's what my listeners are here for. And I will do my best to include resources in the show notes if we get too technical. But I'm going to start where I always do with my guests, to allow my audience into your world for a little bit. Would you like to share the sort of 30,000 foot view of who you are? And what I always like to say is, how do you serve?
Oh boy. Well, by default, I'm a chiropractor at this point. It wasn't the first career choice. I went from working in a hospital lab. I have a master's in industrial hygiene, which is occupational safety. I got recruited to go work for Food and Drug Administration as a federal investigator. I specialized in medical devices. And it wasn't until I was having a chronic migraine case, and then I went to a chiropractic office, and it was fun. And I'd never been to a healthcare field that was fun. And I went home, I told my wife, I said, I want what this guy has. And within a couple months, we packed up. We moved our family. We had 2 kids. We moved our family to Davenport, Iowa, went to chiropractic school, and have just run with the career after that. I was fortunate to work with this, I call him a wizard, who taught me these real specific chiropractic care. We did clinical nutrition. We did brain work. So we did it on a model of structure, energy, emotion, nutrition, wow, and balanced out these most difficult cases. That was just straight out of chiropractic school. So, I learned by trial by fire with this, and just have kind of continued the work since.
I love that. And I love hearing chiropractors' journeys, because every chiropractor I have ever spoken to, whether it's from childhood or later in life, gets to be a chiropractor because they saw a chiropractor and were like, this is amazing. This is life-changing. I have to do this. And then when my listeners know I'm a functional medicine practitioner, and whenever I hear someone go, I kind of learn it by being mentored on the job. That's how we all learn. I think we leave school with like, I have no idea how to speak to a patient. I've got no idea what to do. But these complex cases, we get kind of this learning as we go. And the fact that there are mentors in the field helps a lot of the time. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I was fortunate. 6 years of mentorship, like that's kind of unheard of in our field.
Right. So what does your world look like today? Like, what's your own clinic? What are your cases? What's your typical practice? Because I get the sense from reading your bio and from looking a little deeper that this is more than just chiropractic, as you've just mentioned to me in terms of like the original mentorship. So what does your world look like today?
So I moved back to my hometown and opened up a clinic here, and I offered all the services that I couldn't find. And so my clinic has just grown and grown and grown. So I have myself and 2 associate chiropractors, and I have a physical therapist, and I have an occupational health manager. So I run basically 3 clinics out of one. My chiropractors and we are trained in a technique called Atlas orthogonal, which is a real specific upper cervical technique that's based off of x-rays. It's as scientific as you can get. We do that. We're also acupuncturists. So we like to work with the energy fields and move energy around that way. The physical therapy, like he is dynamic. He works a lot with vestibular balance on top of his normal sports rehab and normal things. So he fits that need in between when patients need more care. And then our occupational health, we just run through a lot of guys for everything from DOT exams. And then that's kind of like day to day. And then I have my playground. And with that, I trained in, I have to say clinical nutrition because of my state. I can't call it functional medicine. And then I'm also trained in neurodevelopmental disorders. So I hold a fellowship in that. And so I get to assess individuals on this really deep level. I model it around looking at the way the nervous system develops from a neurodevelopmental standpoint. I even like to go back and look at the binary state. So what side would be dominant based off of birth? Which is, sometimes I think is overlooked and it's not really addressed before you get into the neurodevelopmental process. And then you can go and insert and see where the breakdown occurs.
So many things to double click on. I want to go back and you can take us back to the Atlas orthogonal technique. So if people don't understand chiropractic, like what are chiropractors actually doing is my first kind of question. And the second question I have is why this technique for you and your clinic? Why does it make sense to you?
So chiropractic is about connecting the brain to the body. We're about removing interferences in the nervous system. So if you go outside and you look at a tree and you go around there and put a big rubber band around it, and then over the next few years, you choke off part of that and that tree doesn't grow to its full potential because it has a weak point in your system. So as a chiropractor, we go in there and clip that little band to make sure that tree can grow up to its fullest potential. So we're basically removing any interferences in the nervous system. Atlas orthogonal really, really intrigued me. I went to school because I had migraines. It was just a posture being on the computer all day, hunched over. I drove a lot. And so I went through the first third of school and we're rough on each other because you need hands-on time, right? You got to learn what your skills are. You got to learn what it feels like. So, I don't want to say we adjusted each other, but we worked on each other a good bit and it messed me up for even further. So I got adjusted with this technique and it's, so Atlas orthogonal, you look at the first vertebra in the neck. All the other vertebrae from C2 down to sacrum all interconnect with these facets, but that C1, it's a little 2-ounce bone. It holds up a 12-pound bowling ball of your head, right? And there's a lot of critical wires in there, all your brainstem, things that control your respiration, digestion, perspiration, circulation, all those body functions you don't think about, on top of muscles that are actually receptors for balance. So, I mean, if I could pick one area to balance out on somebody to have the biggest impact, that's it. It's that top vertebra. And let's do it as scientifically and as engineering as possible.
It's interesting because I've seen a lot of chiropractors and I was at one point very being adjusted a lot by people who practice the Gonstead technique. Since I've moved to Austin, I see someone who very much works from the top down rather than the bottom up. And the sustainability of the adjustments has been actually life-changing for me. It's like I went from needing chiropractic care regularly. I have a connective tissue disorder, which means that I'm very hypermobile generally. And so the potential risk for me, like just micro moving vertebra, is high. And so I used to need to be adjusted twice a week sometimes, whereas then having kind of neck down stuff, because it's working so much from the neurological as opposed to from the structural, it's given me a lot more longevity. So I can skip weeks and not see my chiropractor here. So it's interesting that I get the sense that chiropractors fight a lot and have like opinions and are like, this is the right technique, this is the right approach, this is the right thing. And as a patient, I'm just like, this works for me. This kind of top-down approach works for me.
Yeah, that's the beauty in our field is there's so many different approaches. I mean, you can't even count the number of techniques, but that's the thing. Each patient needs something different. And so there's no shortage of patients that need that specific type of care, one or the other. And there's not, one's not right, one's not wrong. It's just, you got to get you got to help the right people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really want to just make sure that everyone really heard that in no part of what you just explained about what chiropractors do, did you mention back pain?
Oh, no, our philosophy is that the body is a self-healing organism, and it's not, in fact, I have a sign that says chiropractic is designed to make you heal faster, not get out of pain faster, as when you leave my clinic. So you see it every single time. So it's about healing. Not necessarily pain management, but that's a nice side product of it.
It is. The annoying thing that I find, and we had an event last night and we spoke to this, because it's like a lot of people find people like you and I when they're in pain or have symptoms and problems. And I'm really campaigning for people to find the support that this physiological organism of humanness needs prior to it actually breaking. But a lot of people only go to chiropractors when they have back pain, when they have problems. And I'm like, some of this should be like essential maintenance for the human vehicle, in my belief anyway.
Right. Well, that'll take us into our discussion about neurodevelopmental disorders, right? So it's a sensory integration issue. So a lot of people can't feel their bodies, right? So they're disconnected from it. So how are you going to know you need help, right? And what's the value of achieving help if you don't know you need it, right? Are you just wasting time, right? So part of this is, as a practitioners, we need to get our patients and the population back into their bodies so they can experience life again, and that we can help them so that they can achieve longevity. But in order to get that, ironically enough, they probably need to experience some more pain at first.
Well, I'd love you to speak about this neurodevelopmental stuff a little further, because, I'm a trauma trained practitioner. So I do a lot of the, if something somatically has been interrupted later in life. But I feel like this pre and perinatal stuff, this, neurodevelopmental world is perhaps underappreciated, and especially underappreciated from the doctor medical level. I think there's a lot of coaches trying to do rebirthing and things like that. But I'd really love you to speak to, one, why is this interesting to you? Where did this come from? And two, just talk us through the field. What are you finding? What are you looking at? What's interesting from your perspective?
Right. So, it's all science-based, and it's a matter that a person needs to go through a very specific developmental sequence in order to achieve the highest level of academic and mentalization that you can achieve. So we have default programming. I talk about this for some people that are familiar with older computers. That makes a little more sense, where you have a computer that has a DOS system in it. So you birth out of the womb and you turn your head, your elbow bends so you can fit out of the womb. You get a little brush on your cheek, you're going to turn your head, lift your lip so you can feed and be fed. So it's just innate programming that is built into our system. But as you get older, in 4 months, 6 months, and different milestones throughout the first year, those programs need to be written over. They don't need to be erased, but you need to put another level on it. So if you go from DOS, now we're going to put Windows on one of those computers, right? And some of those things might be like reflexes, where if you take a baby and you hold them in one hand and you toss them backwards, their arms are going to go flare up, right? But as you become an adult, you do the same thing. If you throw back an adult, their arm's going to go backwards. So those are your postural reflexes. So that's the next level up. And so there's everything that goes in there with eye stabilization, ear stabilization, spinal activation if you stand on one leg or the other. So all these reflexes need to be built up appropriately in order for you to be able to balance this big old cranium of your system. And so that brainstem can develop, so the cerebellum can develop, so the parietal and temporal lobes can develop. So then if, at the end, your executive function, so the part of your brain that dictates what you think and what actions you want to take, can actually mature.
And what goes wrong?
So part of that is sometimes people will miss these developmental milestones, or they'll have these retained, or if with a trauma, sometimes returned primitive reflexes. And stroke victims are called frontal signs. And so you can get these primitive reflexes that just never integrated. And it might be something slight, where somebody turns their head and then their shoulder pulls up and their elbow bends, and they don't know until they're weightlifting and then they can only turn their head one direction. If they happen to be under a bench press and turn your head the other way, that weight's going to fall.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually seen this and didn't even know what it was. I saw a kid lifting. He turned his head to talk to his mom as he's doing a rep, and the whole thing fell and all the weights crashed off to the side because he didn't put cuffs on it either. So it has real world implications. Mm-hmm. Some of these might be, if you have some bladder issues, you may have a Perez. So if you hit the backside, you stroke by both sides of the spine on the back, it has a relation to the bladder. And so, on top of that, we have to look at some of the nerves through there. So these things have real world implications and actually can be the cause of some of these disease states and conditions that just never been looked at.
Mm-hmm. And so what are you doing with this? Is this just research for you right now? Or are you actually translating this into clinical practice? Where is your field at?
Oh, this is absolutely in clinical practice at this point. I'm working off a lot of the work off of Dr. Melillo. He's out of New York, and a lot of his research, because he publishes on this continuously. So the brain needs sensory motor input to mature. Right? You can't just mature without right sensory inputs. We were built and evolved to walk long distances. In order to get that, we got a lot of stimulation coming up from our feet, going up through our legs to the spinal cord, up into the brain. So you need this metronome of your right arm, left arm swinging in order for your brain to mature. Mm-hmm. But if you walk too early and you didn't crawl long enough, you didn't get enough time for a riding reflex. Oh, there we go. Then you end up with these developmental delays or missed milestones. Mm-hmm. And so where, the right brain's going to be really strong until about age 2. It's why you don't have memories before age 2. So if you can remember before age 2, you probably have some neurodevelopmental disorders, mm-hmm. right? And then the left brain turns on. Mm-hmm. And then if there's an imbalance or weakness between the two hemispheres, the stronger side is going to win and take over controls that it probably shouldn't have done. Mm-hmm. A lot of my conversations are with people that are left brain dominant, right brain weakness on a functional side. We call it a functional disconnection syndrome, mm-hmm. where they have a really, really good ability to build these analytical models in their brain, meaning they look at everything from a bottom up approach, mm-hmm. right? So they can stack up all the things to make a decision, but then they also kind of miss the big picture, which comes out of the right brain. Mm-hmm. So it skews your view of the world. Interestingly enough, the left brainers, so they miss the big view of the world, and the information they get comes from the right brain. The right brain knows that there's more information out there and it can't process all of it. But the left brain only has what's given to it by the right side. So it thinks it has all the information. So it's very difficult for somebody that's left brain dominant and right brain weak to know that they're wrong or need help.
Everyone listening to this is now going through their Rolodex of friends, colleagues, family members thinking, yeah, that's them. That's them. But it's so funny because we have these personality typing things, whether it's a 12-question quiz on Facebook or whether it's these really complicated analytics. We have one at work that people use, and I sit there going, everyone's just diagnosing a symptom within these. It's like if there are psychological quirks so what you've actually just described is it's something that's familiar to me from a different languaging system, and it's this is the people who are use first and don't look at concept. It's exactly what you just said to me, and I'm concept first and then look at the use of the thing. And it's such a disconnect, but it doesn't translate to people who create these personality typing things, that this had to happen somewhere. There had to be some kind of original calibration or lack of it, that means that it's a behavior pattern or a mental pattern in the now. And I'm fascinated about what can we do about some of this? How do we change those dominances?
Well, I want to go back just a second, because Bruce Morton, who was a researcher out of Hawaii, he studied binary aspects of right and left brain dominance. So it's the way you were born, not necessarily which part was functionally stronger or weaker or what messed up during development, but binary side of it. And when you look at the research out there and who developed these questionnaires, these are people that are left brain dominant. You don't really have a big, a real strong right brain dominant person sitting there typing up these questionnaires and testing them, because it's meticulous.
Yeah.
So you have bias out of the gate with these questionnaires.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to get authentic information unless you have somebody doing these studies that knows, okay, I'm going to have this bias. Let me put a team member in here that's going to have this bias, and we'll assess it with this group to go that way. And it's so it's really interesting when you go about it that way.
I know that's fascinating as well. It's like the more I think about some of these healthcare world as well, there's a lot of bias. It's basically the healthcare system has been established by white men. Like it's kind of where it exists. And so many of the assumptions that we forget to question come out of that, just as a sidebar. It's just as an observation. But I hadn't even thought that like the people designing the questionnaires probably were going to evaluate them through their biases. But yeah, so okay, so how do you go about then unpacking this, either with patients or in kind of how do we think about how can we do something about some of this?
So it's a mix of some validated questionnaires. And part of it's going to be subjective. So we can determine based off of what the person's feeling, what kind of symptoms they're exhibiting, gastric motility, sleep. I mean, there's a lot of things you look at with this. And then sometimes you just look at the parent. The dad's an engineer. The mom's just a homemaker that's pretty balanced. The dad's like one of the best engineers. He works at like a nuclear facility. Doesn't acknowledge anything's wrong with that kid, but that kid is really quirky. He probably went off the cliff. We call it going off the cliff because the dad's right on the left side, can still function in life, but that kid just went a little too far. So you look at it, it's an inheritable trait to some degree. Yeah. You get an artist that's really big picture things, and their child is very, aloof, just, very big picture. Yeah, the kid's probably or has dyslexia. So that kid's probably going to be really strong right brain dominant and have some left brain weakness. And so that's the first part. So the next part is there's actually a physical exam. So we take them through these movements. So we tuck their chin, go side to side, use a brush, check the palmar reflex, the Babinski, the spinal galant. So a lot of these primitive reflexes. And then you go up to the next level. You look at core strength because, a kid might have an issue just balancing up their head because their core is so wobbly and they're doing this the whole time. Well, the symptom is they have poor handwriting. So how are they going to be able to stabilize their hand if they can't stabilize their core? Right. But then how are they going to be able to do that unless they have an oculomotor issue because their eyes are bouncing all over the place? Or, the balance system, from the muscle spindles in the back of the neck. This is why I always start with the atlas before I even do these exams. Maybe that's going to be thrown off. And so they're going to have these balance and coordination issues. So we go through and we figure out where the breakdown is. And then we use real specific exercises to strengthen. Again, the brain develops through sensory motor stimulation. So you have to be real specific with the dosing and the exercises that you're giving and the frequency in order to get the brain to mature. Okay. And so it's a brain, we're framing it like a brain maturation program almost. It's like the need for the brain to almost develop the bridges or the links or the systems or the things that it didn't. Is that an accurate kind of layman's terms explanation? Right. So if the right hemisphere is really, really strong, the left side's weak, we're going to do all the exercises to drive up the left side to make it stronger. Right. We're not going to mess with the right side too much because it's already strong. We just want to bring the other one up to the equivalent level. So this one's resonating really high and the other one's resonating low. Well, there's going to be some for lack of a better term, like anxiety between the two. And so now what we want to do is just bring them up to the same level. And then now they can communicate and they don't have to scream at each other. And so 2 questions that come to mind. It's like, how long does that take on average? And also how effective is it? Like, are we seeing results and how long do they last? Yeah. So one of these things is this isn't temporary. You actually bring the brain up to speed. There's been these studies with, I think it was roughly 50,000 participants that showed that they will catch up in grade. So it's these brain balance centers did this massive study on all of their students and to see that this is actually effective and it stays with them long term. Right. Great. And how long does it take to sort of like see results? Is that super variable depending on the issue? Yeah. Well, the best way I can tell this is one of the fantastic articles was about 3 times a week for 12 weeks showed dramatic improvement. So it's really, once you get the correct exercises and you have the right techniques, you can make huge differences in a matter of months.
It's so interesting because my brain, as you're speaking, I'm kind of going in multiple different directions internally because I do different things. So we at the clinic have a brain scan, a QEEG brain scan, and then we apply what we call neurostim treatments, which is essentially electromagnetic treatments to the brain to try and do some of this. And I wonder somehow whether these tools are doing the same thing or they're complementary and can be done together in terms of like trying to, I mean, I'm a big fan of stacking protocols. And I also know about the safe and sound protocol from Stephen Porges and the polyvagal theory, which is another kind of recalibrator, particularly for the inner ear for trauma. And it can massively change the behavior and the capacity to be in the world, especially of children, but also of adults, which essentially strips out high and low frequencies of trauma stress frequencies from music and aims to recalibrate the brain. I'd love your take on, if you know anything about these other modalities, what your view is on stacking, or are they doing similar things just from different perspectives? What's your take on that?
Right. So, we don't just do an exercise. I'll put on glasses, colored glasses, red or blue. I use vibration. We'll strap that to the arm or the leg, or I'll have them stand on a vibration platform. We'll use oils to drive sense. So we try to incorporate, or a metronome beeping in one ear, a flashing light. So we use all these different modalities, and it's you try to figure out which one the patient responds to best. And then you can use multiple ones, but you have to test it, right? It's not just toss it all on there and what's the response. Mm-hmm. So the thing is, like, you can test a primitive reflex, you can do an intervention, and we can see if it got graded lower, right? And then we can actually go to the opposite side. Let's just say we're doing stimulation, sound with the right ear. We go to the left ear, do it a time to balance them out, test it again. They'll go back to their default grade or their initial grade. And then we try maybe colored glasses, and we'll see what that response is. And then we'll try both together, and then we'll try oils. So we figure out what the key is, that it's a very specific process of what that patient needs, and it's not guesswork.
Yeah, I love that. And it's, for me, I think the first thing my mum taught me, I think I would have been, 11, 12. She was doing something called brain gym. And essentially it all starts with cross crawls. So essentially you're trying to bring the body and mind and all of the hemispheres together. And then she got into something where I can't even remember the name of it, but she was a health kinesiologist, lots of muscle checking, but using different colors, like to work out what color the person was needed or was dominant in. I don't know all of the details, and it was profound what this, just putting like a plastic different color thing on someone's eyes would change in the whole system. And so it feels like, this was a long time ago, but it feels like this science that's coming into it now is actually formalizing some of these things which kind of came from alternative medicines or therapeutics and bringing it into much more, solid evidence proven techniques. Like it sounds like.
Yeah, a lot of it's catching up. What you run into, though, is the funding isn't really there in a lot of cases for this, which is one of those things, why you got a lot of scientific research on biochemicals, because you can patent those, and the research money is a lot easier for that. But it is fantastic that there is research showing that these techniques work. Because, as a practitioner, I use things out there that aren't always scientifically proven because that's what the person responds to and what they need. As long as it's a safe, aspect, it's basically like an off-label use in order to help them achieve the results that they want.
I think that there's a lot of talk about, I think Peter Attia has been very good at labeling this medicine 3.0 at the moment, which is basically not relying on a randomized controlled trial for everything, because we're never going to get it. And actually understanding that we can use the inferences from some of the evidence that we do have to run real life experiments and take the anecdote as enough evidence for that personalized one person client, and then run with it, because that's healthcare. That's actually healing for people.
Yeah, it's interesting when you're sitting. I've sat on institutional review boards. I've inspected clinical investigators. I've inspected institutional review board and all these studies. So when you actually get to see how some of these data points are developed and how they find products and systems based off of the research, yeah, a lot of this is inferred, and then they find that data point and kind of tease it out and do some data mining around it.
Right. Well, I keep saying to people in the like biohacking world, which is a part of where I reside, so much of the stuff that we're doing now came out of bro science. It was literally bodybuilders trying to like get jacked and, win the competitions. And so they started with the peptides, they started with the quantified self movement, and it's like, oh, now we're actually seeing that there's real evidence here, but some guinea pigs have to try it to get us anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we're limited based off of looking at research articles that are written in English when there's a lot of things out there in, and I know like Yonda did some really good work, and I think that was in Czech. And like there's just so much good work out there that, I mean, frankly, I can't read, but I would love to be able to read. And then the translations, you always lose something in the translations.
You do. I was speaking to actually a client the other day who'd found some like peptide resource for oral peptides, but it was all in Russian. And so we were like, well, I can't read Russian. I'm waiting for AI to catch up. So it really is great translation. And then we can have access. And it's happening. We were speaking last night at our event about the doubling of data from health in the health field. And now, originally it took, I don't know exactly the facts, but it took a very long time for the data to actually double. And then it was like every 20 years it would double. And now the amount of data in healthcare is doubling every 7 months. And you're like, wow, it's exponential. And I think that we're in that, information gathering phase. And I sometimes look at AI and get worried, but then at other times I'm thinking, well, actually, we need something to make sense of all this vast data sets, and collation of all of this information might be where AI comes to the fore. But who knows? I'm not intelligent enough to make comments on that kind of thing.
Well, I can hope, because I can tell you I have a stack of articles, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches deep that I plan to read this weekend. And so then I got to use my own computer to put those bits and pieces together. And I can only read so fast, and, try to balance out family time and patient time and CEO time.
Yes. I want, my desire would be an AI that can cliff notes effectively and accurately like research papers for us, because then it would be easy. But however, mutual contact, Dr. Dan Stickler over at Apeiron, seems to be able to read research a vast, like he was actually the one I was doing the event with last night. Just to give our listeners context, if anyone's listened for a while, Dan will be a name that they will know. Apeiron will be a name that they will know. But you are an Apeiron trained epigenetic coach. Is that correct?
Oh, I am. Yeah. I've been a client and a coach with him for, over 5-6 years now. Yeah, it is amazing. And I love how he shares so much of that information. So, I've consumed a lot of that. And, I try to share into the group too, like a lot of this neurology based care, because, part of that is I've seen that's been missing and holistic, and like we've looked at the biochemistry for so long, but even like what he'll talk about, right? You talk about leaky gut. So we talk about it using BPC as a peptide to heal it up. Well, we really need to go back a little step and see, why do you have leaky gut? Well, leaky gut is a primitive reflex that you have so that you can absorb nutrients from your mom's breast milk. So it's a primitive state. And if that's shown up, you've had trauma. You've either not matured, your brain has not matured to seal up that GI system, or you've had trauma somewhere around your brainstem that has caused that to return. And so if you don't look at the underlying cause or determine the underlying cause of something like leaky gut from a neurologic standpoint, you're never going to get it to heal up, and you're always going to have chronic inflammation. And so whatever your gout or knee pain or what will not get better if you don't address the neurology side of things.
You probably just summarized a little part of our event last night. It was a public event where we were talking about our medical program at Kuya, whereas he's the medical director and I'm the clinic lead. And we had this conversation, and one of the questions was like, how would you deal with like gut health stuff? And I'm the super integrative functional medicine practitioner who basically goes, oh my God, that question's so broad. I can't even like that. That's a 3-hour lecture in and of itself. But I sort of led with the nervous system stuff, because I'm very much like you. There's this there's a stress picture behind it. There's a something's happened. There's a, I can talk to you all day about gluten, but like this is why do you react to gluten in this way? And we know from doing the genetics readings that like a fragment of health stuff is genetic, and so much is this epigenetic, what's turned on and off during your lifetime of circumstances. And for sure, you can take BPC. We sell BPC. I recommend BPC, but it's like you'll always have to take it if you don't fix the reason why this is triggered in the first place.
Yeah, that's the value of getting to the root cause of the issue.
Yeah.
And just determining exactly where that's coming from.
And I'm really interested in this kind of like, what it sounds to me like you're saying is trauma at some point actually is triggering the original fractures that might have occurred, even if you kind of moved beyond them, but you just missed those developmental stages. It's like something happens to then send us back to not being able to have that function effective inside our physiology.
Right. Well, I think it makes your weaknesses more apparent more than anything else, right? So it's, if you have an inherent weakness, and let's just say, you still have the asymmetrical tonic neck reflex. So every time you turn your head, your elbow bends, but you don't know that until you're driving, right? Like you're out playing football with your buddies and you get hit, or, you sprain your shoulder. So now you're being more gingerly with that right shoulder, but you look out into traffic and then your arm does this move. And so now your car's jerking. So you things get exacerbated when you have an injury.
Yeah. And I will back up and ask the question in a bit of a better way. I was going to ask earlier, a question came to me of like, why this for you? But it sounds like your feeling is that this really is getting to root cause beyond like the trigger, beyond the thing that is started the cascade. It's like focusing on the originating thing. Would that be an accurate statement?
Right. Yeah, it would be, because I look at it and starting out studying biochemistry, clinical chemistry, blood banks, and then I worked up into the full systems, right? So then I looked at it from an occupational health, and then even like lung systems and noise systems, and looked at these things in rows. And then I went down and looked at it from a real medical device pharmaceutical. So I looked at it from that aspect, and then also looked at it like, how do these subjects respond to these medications, right? And then I looked at it again in like the big holistic picture of spinal health. And then I went back and looked at it from standpoints of cancer development and autoimmune development. So it's like I've waffled back and forth of the big and then the small. And then when you look at the theme, it's development. It's how we developed, what went wrong, fix that, or I don't want to say fix, but you address that. And then the body is a self-healing organism. It wants to mature. It wants to go towards its fullest potential. So all you got to do is remove that interference, and this does it. And the neurology is the way we are wired. It's what controls everything. It's connected to every endocrine system. It's connected to the gut. But we just got to target the right area in the right way.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the more I think about this and the more I contemplate healing as like a broad spectrum thing, I feel like that there is roots to healing. It's like sometimes people can start right at the root. Sometimes people do need to start a bit on the edges to get them to the point where they can get to the root. But as long as we're all focused on almost this, there's no guilt, there's no shame, this is just a functional mechanistic thing that needs work, needs support, needs retraining, or training for the first time. It feels like we can get people into a place of almost all of their systems singing from the same hymn sheet.
Right. And so when you look at a model of it, right, there's a developmental process, and then there's different input points. So not everybody needs to start down at ground zero. Like I like to start people there because I like to say, oh, you're good here, you're good here. And so the sequence I look at is your binary state. It's your genomics. It's also like what you were inherently born with. And then we look at those primitive reflexes, the programming you had when you were born. And we look at those posture reflexes. And then we look at motor patterns. But motor patterns are important. It's not just how you move and walk. It's, do you clench your jaw? Like, do you pucker your cheeks? Like, and those hold emotions. And so we look at motor patterns for, emotional positions. And then we go to the next level, and that's going to be sensory integration. So do you actually sense your body? Can you feel when you're full? Do you overeat because of that? What emotion is attached to it? And then we go up to, we touched on this, and then you go into language.
Mm-hmm.
And what symbols has somebody associated with their constructs of the world, right? And so this is where we get into the psychology and the coaching around that. And then we go into thinking. So once you've built your symbols, then you go into your thinking. So how do you think? Are you really analytical? Are you bottom up, top down? And then we go on into like some higher levels beyond the thinking, all the way up into academics, right? So you can't achieve academic or knowledge and acquire those memories you need for life skills if you don't have all those other constructs in place in the right order. And then you go up into consciousness or mentalization, which would include some consciousness, and that's its own field, which is fascinating. So you look at it, okay, did the person develop in like a pyramid status, so they have strength all the way around building up, or do they build up as like a silo where they've missed, they're okay, but really they don't, a big earthquake comes or a big trauma comes and everything's going to come shattering down. Like if we can look at it and develop them, help them develop the way they're supposed to develop, they'll be dense and they'll be solid and unshakable.
It's wonderful to speak to people who really think about the foundational formation things. I'm very interested in Stanley Kellerman's work in somatics and the kind of like approach to how your body forms around the thing. But as you're speaking, it's like I'm realizing that the science behind that. So a lot of Stanley Kellerman's work is kind of like observational in nature. It's like it's a witnessing thing where he's observed and patterns and body formation and shapes, and it's great. But I'm realizing as you're speaking, it's like I haven't really asked the why behind that. It's like, why that? And it feels like what you're speaking to is this neurodevelopmental thing underneath the formation of the thing, which is going to be foundational for structure of form as well as then language and thought. And I find language fascinating. It's like, particularly being a Brit living in America, I did not realize the amount of translations I would have to make to my language because they just don't make sense. And it's been shocking because we speak the same language. And it has really made me question and be in the contemplation of every time I use a word, whether it's here on the podcast or with a client in clinic or giving talks, it's like my understanding of that word is only mine. And everyone else is having a different filtered experience of that speaking. And I've really witnessed since I've been in America, and it's only been sort of 6 months since I've been out and about talking to people here. And it's like, oh, we're not having the same conversation. And suddenly you're like, well, yes, some of this is cultural, but that is formed by, language fascinates me. And if you have any like interesting things to share here, I'd love to hear your perspective on some of those things.
Oh, this is an area where I'm a student. I am studying this because language it's so critical on the constructs of how we have developed, but also like our higher thinking. And this is the area I'm kind of studying right now, right? I'm really fascinated where the brain and the body meet the soul. And that comes in through this thinking and language, and getting into the consciousness side of things. So, if you want to kind of put that in an easier perspective, it's what are your mechanics of breathing in order to hit meditation? Oh, there's so much more to that because it's the space between the breaths. It's what the breath is. It's where in your body the breath is coming from and exiting. There's just so much depth to that.
You're talking and I'm like, oh my God.
It's just, it's so fascinating. And I mean, I have more than enough just in that topic itself to study for the rest of my life.
Right. And it feels like this speaks to why we need multidisciplinary teams of people supporting people and why we need bright minds sharing wisdom, because no one human is capable of doing all of the research necessary to have the inspirational insights to come up with things. It's like the more I feel into the way the functional medicine or any of these fields work, the more frustrated I get with the siloed nature of practice and how we get these little clinics with one person and I'm like, should we just all get in a room and have a conference where we're not trying to sell anything, but we're just trying to like actually help the field understand where its gaps are. And I think that's the thing that I'm hearing from today. It's like, even just in our conversation, I'm starting to see, oh, I have a gap here. I have a gap where I need to like either fill it or just be aware that there's a gap, so that when I hit that edge of my knowledge, I know that there's somewhere else that that person needs to be sent. They need to go and get support.
Right. So, I mean, even before this podcast, I was on the phone with a friend, and he's an expert on mind space. And so, man, I am actively recruiting him to be the guy that comes in and goes over language and thinking and sensory integration. And like, okay, I know this stuff at the bottom, and I live this day in, day out. I see a lot of patients in a day. I'm hands on with them all day long. I was like, but this is where you reside. This is like your specialty. So let's stack that. And then let's go find one more person that does the top pyramid work, right? Because I mean, we need that consciousness. And then I know that I need somebody on the foundation side, because like I know the genomics. I'm a certified coach. I know these binary questionnaires, they take time, but there's somebody out there that freaking loves that stuff. And we can coach on that. We can do the repair. We can hand you off to the next guy where he can help build that next level up. So it does need to be a team approach.
Yeah.
And I mean, something like the equivalent of like a Cleveland clinic for holistic health that would be my dream.
I love it. We're in the process of building our clinic team at Kuya at the moment, and building people to like bringing in people to take some of the the genomics takes ages, and bringing in someone to take some of that off me and all of that stuff, but also bringing in our psychotherapeutic program, so our ketamine assisted psychotherapy, which is like coming in soon. And it's like we're also trying to redefine, how does multidisciplinary work as well? Like how do you not just have like a set of people in the same building but not really working as a team, really humming along as a team, and like being able to fully get enough of what the other people do to know where it fits, but also know their lane and stay in their lane and feel really solid in it. And it's a complicated world. It feels like, but it does feel like there's lots of people doing this at this moment in time. And you're, the Cleveland Clinic for like holistic integrative medicine sounds like a necessary thing. And I love, having conversations with people who are also on the same mission and feeling into the same need.
Right. And I mean, there's people I've met with along the way that they're looking for like a hands-on approach. Like I have an occupational therapist. I met with her a little while ago. I'm like, I think this is the work that's going to make your consciousness coaching take it to the next level, because you can go into a deeper level. So you have the ability to do hands-on, to do the assessments, to read people. And now you can take your coaching practice into that next level. So everybody can use it. You can use the work for where it fits you ideally, and where it basically makes the most benefit to the patient.
And that's it. And that's the other thing that I'm really witnessing within the space at the moment, particularly within the people that I speak to. And I keep my circles very small for this reason. All of us are saying whatever is going to serve the patient, not how can I make the most money, not how do the economics of ketamine assisted psychotherapy stack up in a clinic setting and this, that, and the other. Obviously, that's a consideration. We're all running businesses, but it's like we run businesses to keep food on our table and roofs over our head, so that we can keep serving patients. And I'm sure you do at your clinic, and we do this at our clinic. It's like one of our guiding principles is excellence in care. And that is before profit, before, we, in our core values, we don't put make money. It's not that. It's be excellent for the end user, because we believe that like healthier humans make a healthier planet, and then we have healthier humans to make more of everything. And it feels like there's a lot of people having those conversations at the moment, which to me, after the few years we've had of like healthcare arguments, it feels like there's a nice end like trajectory happening.
That was beautiful. It was a pain point we needed to go through as a society, so that we could reassess and grow again. So you take the pandemic as terrible things happen, but you take it as a wake up call. And there's a lot of people that have been heeding that call and are stepping up to make better benefits for society and patients.
Yeah. Yes. And it feels, I don't know about you, but I feel very much like the adjustments that we have all made internally as healthcare professionals, because we were all healthcare professionals whilst the world was having so many opinions about healthcare, and nobody spoke to me for months. It was like, I might die from a virus, therefore I'm not going to speak to the crazy functional medicine practitioner who like wants to sort my gut health for months. And it's like, I feel like there's this settling happening post all of that crazy, and people are like, okay, now can we get on with the real work? That's kind of the energy I'm feeling in the field, and it feels wonderful to know that there's people all over this country and the world taking steps forward to really go, how did we get here as human beings with our behavior patterns and our unique quirks of craziness? How did we get here? Where did it start? How can we maximally support the resolution of these imprints?
That's, again, well said. And that's what we're doing. I love that I'm able to participate and see it from the nervous system standpoint. It's not the only standpoint. There are other ways. Mm-hmm. But this is so intriguing. It's so worthwhile. It's worth an assessment. And just to have that part of your body cleared out, like everything else can at least get lined up so it can heal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. We have I casually said an off-the-cuff statement a while back in one of our team meetings, and it's just like, unless we know what's physical health, and by that I meant foundational, structural, neurological foundations, we don't know what's mental health. And as I said it, I was like, oh, like that's actually a really good point. And so I love, you need to start somewhere. Absolutely, you need to start somewhere. You and I were always going to have a conversation about these foundations because it's where we both align. But there are other things that people can, places where people can begin. But on that topic, I will put all the links in the show notes for where people can find you. But are you taking patients at the moment? What is your kind of business structure at the moment? Are they seeing you, your other chiropractors, your other people in your clinic? What's your kind of business at this moment in time?
So right now in my chiropractic clinic, I am not taking new patients. I'm trying to serve the people that have been with me for a long time. I do have a program for intensives. So if people come in for anywhere from 2 days up to 2 weeks. That's InBrain, ENBRAIN, InBrain.health is the website. Mm-hmm. So if somebody wants to work with me in that manner, I love that. Like, I feel like we can dig in. It's a detailed program where we look at all the binary states. We look at these real detailed neurologic exams, structural exams. It's anything I have in the clinic, we do, energetic, structure, energy, emotion, nutrition. We even then flight into whatever other aspects we need to work with somebody else in.
Yeah. Awesome. Wow. And I will put your actual clinic details just let our listeners know where you are based so that they know where they can find you.
I'm in a small town. I'm 90 miles south of Pittsburgh. It's called Bridgeport, West Virginia.
My US geography is absolutely terrible. I genuinely have no idea where that is, but anyone who knows where that is, I will put like a maps link in.
We're 3 hours west of Washington, D.C.
I've been to Washington, D.C., so I kind of know where you are now.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay. Is there anything we haven't covered today that you'd like to mention? Any questions that I didn't ask? Any bits that I missed that you'd just like to make sure that my listeners are aware of?
Oh, that's a big question. I don't know at this point.
Awesome. Well, I am sure that sometimes my listeners get really excited and they reach out to me and say, bring them back for part 2 and really dig into this element. And I'm sure that should that happen, I will reach out to you and get you back on to dig into more details about some of these things. But for now, I've really loved that conversation. Thank you so much for making the time today to talk to me on the Unveil podcast.
Thank you so much.
That a delicious conversation. I hope that you learnt as much as I did through that discussion with Dr. Jimmy Leonetti. Please do check out the show notes for all of the links to find Dr. Leonetti. Obviously, you will need to be local in order to attend his chiropractic clinic. Dr. Jimmy is no longer taking patients himself, but his team are still available to support. I really appreciate having these kind of conversations. So I just want to take a moment to thank every single listener who is there and who's been with us for almost 18 months now. This is a real privilege to get to have these conversations with people like Dr. Leonetti, and I adore that this is a part of the job that I get to do. So there's nothing left to say except thank you for joining me on the Unveil podcast, and I will speak to you again next week.